Let the record once again reflect the acquittance of our jury, as well as the defendant, Mr. Demons, his counsel, the assistant state attorneys. And Ms. Bradley, this is your next witness.
Yes, Detective Mark Moretti.
Mr. Moretti, can you raise your right hand for us?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give in this case shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your full legal name for the record.
Mark Moretti.
Spell your first and last name for the court report.
M-A-R-K-M-O-R-E-T-T.
Thank you.
Please have a seat, sir. That microphone in front of you only goes up or down. It doesn't move back and forth, all right?
Yes, Your Honor.
You ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Counsel, you may.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Detective. How are you today?
Well, ma'am, thank you.
Where do you work?
City of Miramar,
How long have you worked for the City of Miramar?
20 years.
And what is your current
It's 2000, I started working in homicide cases in about 2016.
Prior to becoming a homicide detective for the City of Miramar, what other hats did you wear?
I also worked in economic crimes for a couple of years. Before economic crimes, I worked in street crimes, which is street-level narcotics, gangs, robbery, violent offenders. Before that, I worked in traffic unit, as well as traffic homicide. And then before that, I was in road patrol.
Prior to your time in the Miramar Police Department, did you work for any other law enforcement agency?
Yes, I worked for Pinehurst Police Department in Miami from 1998 to 2003.
And don't make me do math, 2003 to the current, you've been with Miramar?
Yes, ma'am.
Prior to Pinecrest, did you serve in the military or any of the armed forces?
Yes, ma'am. I did a total of 20 years in the military. I did 7 years active in the Air Force, got out shortly after 9/11, went into the Coast Guard Reserve, did another 13 for a total of 20 years. I served in enlisted as well as in the officer corps for the Coast Guard.
So in terms of your training experience as a police officer and a detective, did you attend a police academy?
Yes, in 1997, while still on active duty in the military, I went to St. Petersburg Criminal Justice Center.
And approximately how long was that police academy training?
A couple months.
After you became an officer with Pinecrest, did you have on-the-job training?
Yes, ma'am.
And at Pinecrest PD, did you hold any special titles or roles?
I was a drug recognition expert for field sobriety, impaired drivers. Also maintained the maintenance on the intoxilizer for courtroom purposes.
In terms of homicide specifically, do you have training in just that area?
In Pinecrest,
And all your time in law enforcement?
I've had about 240 hours in homicide investigations. The first class was death investigations here in Broward County. The second one was the Miami-Dade Police Department's Homicide School. And then the third one is through IPTM, which is the Institute of Police Technology and Management, which is another 40 hours of formalized training in the area of homicide investigations. And I attended 3 conferences, which each one is 40 hours long, and specifically to homicide investigations for about 240 hours, just as specialized training.
In terms of on-the-job training, do you have practical experience handling homicide cases?
Yes, I started slowly working homicide cases in 2015, just as training. I was basically writing warrants for the unit. I was feeling fraud, and so when they were on scene, they'd be at the station, and I would get a phone call to start authoring warrants to be prepared for the judge.
Okay. In terms of the number of homicide cases you've handled since you said 2016 is when you went to that unit?
Yes, ma'am.
How many homicide cases, or death investigations, I should say, have you handled since then?
Homicide cases I've been involved in about 40 up to this point. As the lead, maybe 12, 15. Total death investigations, probably another 20 or 30.
So I want to talk about cell phones. Is that another area you have training and experience in?
Yes, ma'am.
What classes have you taken in from Celebrate?
I've been through the basic Celebrate examiner's course to conduct a digital forensic examination of the cell phone, and then interpreting the data from the cell phone as well.
Okay, and in terms of the number of cases that you've worked, could you give an approximate number that involves the data from a cell phone itself?
I've probably handled over the years, probably 75 to 100 cases, specifically just with cell phones.
What about cell phone company data? The true call, the per call measurement, all of that.
I've been dealing with that since I came into the Detective Bureau. So that would be in 2013. I've had a bunch of specialized training in regards to cell sites. I've been to a forensic mapping course. I've been through with the platform what we use to analyze the cell site data, which is called CellHawk, which is a different platform. Then I've been through the FBI's course, which is the CAST. And I still use CAST, the CAST platform, but for different aspects of cell site analysis. And I've been through an actual specific course for cell phone investigation, just using the phone in your investigations.
Can you explain to ladies and gentlemen what is CellHawk? That's the first time they've heard this term.
CellHawk is the same. It's very similar to what the FBI uses. FBI uses what's called CASPIS. CellHawk is just a mapping program working off of Google Maps, to which we plot the data for the cell phone. It takes a lot of the work out. I mean, in the past, when we first started to analyzing cell data, we would have to actually plot the towers ourselves, determine what sector, draw the azimuth. Nowadays, we can just take the cell records and put it into CellHawk. We still have to authenticate it, make sure that the data is being read properly, and then we're able to make our determination or apply the data to our case.
So you mentioned plotting and things like that. Do you use mapping software in your day-to-day work as a detective?
Of course, I mean, we just regular Google Maps, Google Earth. It's also a method of open source investigations is using the mapping.
So I'm going to go to October 26th of 2018. Did you have an occasion to become involved in a Miramar Police Department investigation under Miramar case number 18-10-06269?
Yes, ma'am.
What was your role?
I was called out around about 6 o'clock in the morning. Detective Bertrand called me. I was off, was not working. Hector was in his final year and a half of employment, and he didn't want to take on any new cases. He asked me, he said, I can't have him at the hospital. I have 2 dead bodies. Would you mind coming out? Of course, I said, yeah, that's fine.
So when you got to the hospital, what did you see?
When I first got on scene, I made contact with the on-scene supervisor, which was Sergeant Bermudez, and he walked me through the scene, which was, at that point, it was just a 2018 Jeep Compass that was parked in the emergency unloading zone. It had many bullet holes on it.
Can you time out for just a second? Can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how the emergency room unloading zone is separate and different from other areas of the hospital?
It's a pull-up where it has the electric sliding doors that it allows you straight access into the emergency room, which all hospitals are relatively standard in that sense that there's going to be a quick, immediate access for the hospital personnel to provide immediate care in triage type situations.
Is the emergency room the only entrance into that hospital?
No, you can come. There's an entrance off of Pembroke Road, and there's an entrance off of 172.
And when you came to the scene, do you remember which side you went to first?
No, ma'am.
Okay. The time when you get to the hospital, you talked about speaking with Sergeant Bermudez. Who else did you see on scene?
A couple of the detectives were already there. Detective Bertrand, Detective Toyota was there, and then also a couple of the other sergeants, because we had 2 young males that were deceased. So it prompted a lot of people to be called out to the scene.
Okay. And in terms of civilians, were there any civilians on scene when you got there?
At that point, I wasn't made aware of all the civilians on scene until after we had spoken with Cortland Henry.
Okay. So you mentioned Cortland Henry. Who is that?
Cortland Henry is the driver of the vehicle, and he is also the co-defendant in this case.
And when you made contact with Mr. Henry, where was that?
They had him separate from everyone else. He was in a visiting a room, a treatment room. It was an actual hospital room with a door, not just a sliding shade. It actually was door, window, bed.
When you made contact with Mr. Henry, did you have any knowledge of the surveillance footage from the New Era studio that's been entered into evidence of State 7?
No, ma'am. At that point, I came into it blindly.
So how did you treat Mr. Henry?
He was a victim of a crime.
So the ladies and gentlemen of the jury have already heard the statement that you took. During the course of that statement, what things in that Mr. Henry said started setting off a little bit of alarm bells for you?
The biggest thing is where the crime allegedly had occurred. We were being told it was on Miramar Parkway, and we just west of Southwest 160, as closer to 172, in that area there. But when we had the area walked out, we didn't find any shell casings, didn't find any shards of glass, and you're in a residential. Yes, there is businesses there, but on the south side is residential. As many bullet holes there was in that car. Initially, I think I saw at least 10, and we didn't get a single phone call.
Okay. So when you were there on scene, did you look at the car that was out there? You said you saw at least 10 bullet holes?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you notice any damage to the rims or the tires of the vehicle?
No, ma'am.
Did Mr. Henry tell you about a side swiping of a curb?
He said that when a vehicle pulled up next to him and started shooting, he lowered his position in the vehicle for his safety, and he hit the curb. But there was some front end damage, but you could tell it was older front end damage.
Was that explained during the course of his statement as from a prior accident?
Yes, ma'am, I believe so.
In terms of the way you treated him, what were you taking into account?
He's a victim of a crime. And sometimes when you experience very traumatic situations, you're not going to remember everything. And it's understandable that you're going to be vague sometimes in your facts. And even if you're not from the area, you may be confused on the location. So our biggest thing was that we knew something happened. We knew it just didn't happen where they said it happened.
Why is it important for a law enforcement officer to know where something happened?
Well, we got an established venue, which has been for jurisdiction for us to investigate the crime.
Speaking of venue, in what city, county, and state is Memorial Miramar Hospital?
It's in the city of Miramar, county of Broward, state of Florida.
And at that point, when you're making contact with Cortland Henry, does the name Jamell Demons come up in any way, shape, or form?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any indication that he was in the car told to you at that point?
No, ma'am.
You mentioned at some point in the statement another shooting off of I-95.
Yes, ma'am.
What investigation did you do to see how that was potentially related to this case?
I was able to get a hold of the detective on scene, which is Detective Curcio from Broward Sheriff's Office, and I was able to compare notes and discuss and figure out that shooting was definitely not related to our shooting. They even had a weapon left on scene, which was, I believe, an assault-style rifle, and we was able to determine that was not related to us.
In terms of were you able to determine if different caliber weapons were used in those two shootings?
To the best of my recollection, there was different calibers, and at the end of the day, I know they made an arrest on that, and their facts didn't even match up to our facts.
So going on to potential suspects that Mr. Henry gave you, does he mention anyone or point the finger at anybody at that point?
I think he mentioned one name. They may have had some beef up from Vero, from some guy named Bentley or something like that, but nothing that we could verify.
And in terms of the beef with Bentley, did he say if it was ended?
I believe his statement said it was taken care of, it was squashed.
With regards to an incident at Walmart, were you informed about a potential suspect there?
Yes, there was an incident a few months back at Walmart. I think during his statements, he said first the fight took place inside and it was outside, but I guess a necklace was stolen. It was posted online, but it didn't seem anything really came of that either.
Okay, so Detective Melly, based on your training and experience, have you had the opportunity to respond to various Walmarts across South Florida?
Yes.
Have you done criminal investigations regarding incidents or crimes that have occurred at those Walmarts?
Yes.
Based on that, do you know how long Walmart keeps video for?
Traditionally 30 days.
And in terms of the time period that was being described to you, was that within the 30 days?
It was way beyond 30 days.
So going back to that morning, did you go with Mr. Henry in the car with Detective Toyota to find out where this incident had happened?
No, Mr. Henry rode with Detective Toyota, and it was just them two in the car.
And in terms of the evidence or anything that was reported back to you as the lead detective in this case that was recovered from the street surface of Miramar Parkway between I-75 and 184th?
There was no evidence recovered at all.
So, knowing that you had this location, are there businesses along Miramar Parkway that have surveillance footage?
Yes.
Were you able to go to some of those and retrieve some of that surveillance footage?
Yes.
So I'm going to start with what's been marked as the state's quadruple L, which is a composite of 2 photos. Counsel, you have a copy? Detective Marty, I'm showing you a composite of 2 images which have been labeled as state triple L. Do you recognize those 2 photos?
Yes, ma'am.
How do you recognize those 2 photos?
These are snapshots of the video from the McDonald's, the corner of 172 and Miramar Parkway.
And how do you recognize those?
Well, I'm the one that retrieved the video myself personally. But you can see at 3:46 a.m. you see a red vehicle going by, a red SUV, and then at 3:46:57 you see a silver SUV going by, which was consistent